Hey everybody, Jeremy here from Nobot Studios. Welcome to another Grit Fantasy RPG video. Today I'll be talking about optional rules and how they can be used in your games. Now for starters, I want to say this will be useful information for players. However, this is going to be a GM focused topic, so I wanted to give you a heads up on that. Now when I was writing Grit Fantasy RPG, I came up with a number of rules that I felt were important enough to keep in the book, but that I didn't want to attach to the core rules of the game. So I created the optional rules section, which is just 2 pages of rules. And if you never use these rules at all or never even read them, you can run Grit games perfectly fine. That's why they're optional. But I thought they were worthy of going over, and so here I am with this video. As always, I'm going to go on the left-hand side here. I've got the rulebook pulled up, and we're going to go down into the GM section to the optional rules. Now, I'm not going to go over all of these in exact, intricate details, but there are some that I really will want to talk about more than others. So the first one is the critical role. And if you've played games, RPG games before, this is not a new concept. However, I left it out of the core rules because I didn't want to make critical roles a thing, that you felt you had to do. So for those who don't know, a critical roll is basically rolling a max die or the lowest value. So in the instance of Grit, we're rolling a d12 die. So a natural 1 or a natural 12 could be considered a critical roll. Okay, and that means that something extra can happen. All right, so natural 1 is obviously bad. Natural 12 is obviously good. I think what I kind of have found when I've used this is I use it, but I try not to overdo it. Okay, so if something is really glaring, like a roll is really glaring, like on an opposed roll, one rolls a 12 and one rolls a 1, that discrepancy to me, like something really interesting can happen. So usually I give the advantage to the side that had rolled the natural 12. But sometimes rolling a natural 1, let's start with that, natural 1. You could have things like they drop a weapon, the weapon is disarmed, a weapon is broken, the combatant falls prone. Maybe if it's not in a combat related thing, they're like flubbing up interaction. Like an intimidation becomes a joke, or it's something that just is out of the ordinary that happens. On the other side of that, the 12 could be that you drop or disarm or break an opponent's weapon. Maybe you force the opponent to fall prone. Maybe you affect more than just that one target or opponent. And that goes for all the type of aspects rolls. It could be melee attacks, prowess attacks. It could be insight related things, like you may, like on a natural 12, discern something that's out of the ordinary. Like you can pick out details that are above and beyond. Maybe with a command roll, not only do you intimidate that one target that you're going against, but you intimidate their buddies too. So that kind of stuff, right? So it's just on the fly decisions that you can use these rolls for. And I write in here, vary these effects to keep them from becoming predictable. If unsure when to apply a critical effect, you can just roll the mighty D4 and assign a number to it. So like, let's say it's a natural 1 that gets rolled. You could, if you wanted to, just roll a mighty D4, and if on a 1, if you roll a 1, then the critical effect comes into play. Or if it's a 12, maybe you roll a 4 and then a critical effect happens. So it doesn't happen all the time, but that's a way to kind of curb that if you're unsure. So, that's critical roles. Not necessary to put in the game at all, but if you wanted to, you can certainly, drop those in as you're gaming. So, all right, the next one is not something that is going to come up a lot, but I felt, given the kind of quick play nature of Grit, I wanted to bring up dawdle breaking. So, when you're playing games, this is a normal part of RPG games, right? There's table talk, there's a little bit of strategy going on, but the idea of Grit is that things move quickly, you're reacting quickly, effects only last one round, or they're just one and done type things. So it's a very expedient system, and it's not really set up to accommodate long strategy sessions on how a round is going to go. We're not sitting down for 15 minutes figuring out who's going to go first, what they're going to do, and min-maxing the situation. That's just not what Grit's about. So part of your job as a GM is to kind of know when this is going on and to do something about it. So this kind of gives you the ability to act on that if it comes up. Now, out of all the gaming that I've done with Grit, this has not come up much at all, maybe a couple times. And usually it's very easily remedied. Like, you may not even have to take any of these actions that I've listed, but just mentioning that, okay, guys, come on, we need to get this moving, or taking your turn if you haven't. But anyway, I'm going to go through these 4 things. So the first one, it's like I just mentioned, promptly take your turn if you haven't. So if the players are discussing too much and spending too much time strategizing over stuff, just take your turn. And then they're going to be forced to deal with what's happening and make it something they're not going to predict. So that's one thing you could do. Another thing is just to roll a d4 and spawn some low-level monsters right next to them, right next to the characters. So they're going to have 1 Grit, right? They're going to just be maybe 0 aspect, 1 Grit, or maybe -1 or -2 aspect, but just weak little weaklings, but they're just boom right there and they're attacking. Okay, so they're just going to break up that kind of analysis paralysis stuff. You can also mess around with the environment. So a sudden radius effect hazard, like maybe rocks start tumbling into the scene, or it starts flooding or something like that. Now this kind of feeds into the next one, which is introduce an immediate chaotic or perilous event. This could maybe be kind of tied to a timer, or maybe it's just bigger than just like a radius effect. Maybe it affects the entire scene. Like, the entire floor shifts downwards and everybody's sliding down. Or maybe there's a creature that arrives suddenly and just starts spraying flame all over everything. Who knows? It could be anything, but it gives you the option to sort of drop in some stuff last minute, suddenly, that they are not expecting. Okay. So that's dawdle breaking. It's not something you're going to deal with a lot, but it's there if you need it. Just some ideas on that. Okay, next one. And this is one that I think it's important. And that could affect a lot of games that you run. Now, Grit is gritty. Characters only have 10 Grit, which is health. They may not always have health potions or ways to heal, and they may get into some scrappy situations. So if you want to take it easy on new players, or if you're running games with kids, or you just sort of want to be a little nicer to start, you can go into easy mode. And what I would recommend here is only doing 1 or 2 of these. If you do all of them, it's just going to be out of balance, okay? You can also, there's 6 of them here, so you can roll a d6 and, kind of generate it that way. But I wanted to mention these. The first one is probably one of the first two actually are ones that I do a lot. You start, okay, so you're going to start, it says start each new PC with a random potion that heals D6 grit. That's a totally cool item that they can use, single use, to heal themselves, okay? I think that really kind of brings down the deadliness a little bit, and they feel like they have some kind of way to mitigate damage, right? Because it's a automatic, kind of a free action to down a potion. And the next one kind of is the same thing. It's a random consumable item. So you can roll that on the consumable items list, loot table list, and give them random consumable items. Some of them may be healing or recovering a focus die or any other kind of cool things that they could do, like flying or breathing underwater or intimidating opponents. Who knows? It could be anything, but it just gives them that little bit of funness, that you can give them right off the bat. Another way to do this too is just to maybe not right away, but like have these things planted in your games that they can pick up. Okay. Especially one-shots are great for that. Another thing you could do is award a new player with an extra gear item or artifact. So you can have them maybe choose 5 basic gear items, or maybe roll a random artifact on the artifact table, or even some gear on the gear, like uncommon gear table in the loot section. Just a little bit of a step up for an item that gives them that little bit more power. Another thing, and this is one that I've used too, is that if focus dice roll a natural 1, just have them re-roll it. That there's nothing worse than like, I'm going to do this sweet thing with this focus die, and you only get 3 and you roll a natural 1. You're like, man. So, if you can have them just re-roll a natural 1, they appreciate that a lot. Another thing too is, and this is maybe if you're doing a one-shot that's a little longer, maybe multiple scenes, or like a short campaign or something, allow players to recover 1 focus die between the scenes. And what I would do is have them recover whatever the lowest one that they used. If they used a D4 and they have their D6 and D8 left, just give them the D4 back. I wouldn't give them extra focus dice if they already have all 3. But just give them the lowest one that they've used. Another thing too is if you are someone who runs like big boss battles, have them replenish all their focus dice before the final scene. That's not one that I do a lot because I like it to be a little, little gritty, where you have to kind of look at your grit or focus dice economy a little bit and like plan for this session, especially one shot. You're like, I like that decision of like, should I use my focus dice now, or what am I going to come up against in the next scene here? So be cautious with that one, but it's out there in case you need it. What am I doing here? I'm not okay. No. Limiting PC looting. I already went over that last session or last video, so I'm not going to do that. So we're going to go into page 48 here. And this one is about milestones. Now, if you don't know already, Grit does not have any system of leveling, experience points. There is no milestone system set up for advancement for characters, and I did that on purpose. This is a game that's for one-shots, short arcs, episode-based campaigns. It's not about this leveling up thing that you find in D&D where you get increasingly stronger, bigger, and everything bloats up. It's like you keep going with the character that you have, and you gain stuff along the way that will help you and get you more powerful. And you'll be amazed how fast that actually ramps up with artifacts. But you have the character that you start with, and you take in these experiences and you are sharing them with the other characters. There becomes this story, this narrative type thing that happens that is, in my mind, kind of a more interesting leveling. It's maybe not a leveling, it's just the characters become more experienced. They become more in depth in a way that just from gameplay, they can sort of develop into like the character becomes more developed just from the experiences that they have in the games that are played. So anyway, I just wanted to say that in case you ever do want to run longer games or a short arc, like 3 or 4 sessions, or maybe you want to do episode-based games, like you have an influx of players that just kind of have a starting home base, like a hometown, that have influx of players with new characters all the time, but you just have one episode at a time over and over. I personally like that a lot. But you can add some type of milestone type achievement for these characters. So I made a list of 6 things. The first one is the one that I would go to, like absolutely first choice. Excuse me. And that is awarding loot. So whether it's basic gear, consumable items, uncommon items, unique items, or anything else on the loot tables, awarding loot is like one of the best things you can do. You could do this start of the session, end of the session, or you could just like kind of put these into this into your sessions, like as the characters are, they're discovering these things instead of just getting paid those things. And you could, work in that characters get paid to do jobs. They get paid to, free a prisoner, or free a princess from a dragon. Who knows what it is, but loot could be payment. Okay, so absolutely awarding loot is the best thing, I think. Next one is, which is interesting, is adding a focus die boost. So basically what you could do is add a +1 to a focus die roll for a specific aspect for a character. And how I would do this, you could do it a couple different ways. One way is to award the character yourself that bonus to a focus die based on a specific aspect that they have been using a lot. Not one that they're just not using, but like if you have a fighter type character that's really strong, that's like maybe always using prowess instead, or maybe using might, whatever they're using a lot of, give them that focus die bonus. And it doesn't add a lot of math. It's just when they use that aspect, they get that +1. Okay. I would not go more than a +2 or +3 on that, by the way. If you keep adding and, be conservative with that. Okay. Next one is focus die improvement. So they start with a D4, D6, and D8. So you could award like that D4 turns into a D6. So now they have D6, D6, D8. And maybe that D6 becomes a D8. So it's D6, D8, D8. And then that D8 becomes a D10, and it goes on and on like that. I would be cautious about doing this a lot, but it has potential. And I have not run it like that, but it is an interesting idea. Another thing you could do is if you wanted to do a long campaign where characters kind of grow in strength over time, start them off with 3d4 for their focus dice. They just have 3d4, and then you can start having those focus dice increase over time. So maybe one becomes a d6, another one becomes d6, and then another becomes d8, that kind of thing. So it kind of ramps up that way. So just an idea of how you can use that. One that is next on the list is increasing an aspect. So you can add a +1 to one of the aspects of the characters. So there's a couple things you could do with that too. And I forgot to mention the second thing for the boosting, but is either awarded as the GM to a character that, in a way that seems fit. Like if they're always using a certain aspect, raise that up. Keep in mind, maximum should be always +3, never beyond that. This goes for also the focus dice. The other thing, what I was trying to say is that the character or the player can actually, make the decision for that. So the player can make the decision for the focus die boost or the increase aspect, right? They get to choose what gets raised up. Okay. I know that was kind of a roundabout way to saying it and might have been confusing, but anyway, I'll recap it. So you can, with the focus die boost or increase aspect, you can, as a GM, you can make the decision based on the character's kind of what the character has been doing, or you could just hand it over to the player and just have them raise stuff up. Okay, so the next one is extra focus dice. And this one I would be cautious about. And I think this would work best if you had a long campaign where they maybe start with less focus dice and then increase it over time. But maybe they gain a D4, so they have D4, D4, D6, D8. I would not give them more than 4 total focus dice. If you get too much on that, it's going to get out of hand, so be cautious. And then the last final thing is create an appropriate balanced ability. I don't have anything written out for you for that, so you GMs out there that love the design and homebrew hacking stuff, this may be great for you. I would look at the abilities that are already for the lineages as kind of a guide. Just make sure they're balanced and not overpowering, and that they don't stack up on each other. Just keep them like separate things that do one thing or the other. It's not like, oh, this is going to happen and this triggers something else that triggers this, that triggers this, Another thing you could do is look at artifacts. You could take an artifact, strip it of its physical attribute of being an artifact, and just make it an ability. Okay, that's one thing you could do with that. Final thing I want to say on the milestone thing, if you're thinking about increasing grit, please don't do it. I strongly suggest not to increase grit as a milestone. There's a reason why characters are capped at 10 grit, and that's to keep it balanced and to keep it feeling dangerous, which it should be. It's grit. If you start bloating that grit, it's gonna unbalance the game. So I would strongly suggest not to do that. Okay. All right. I keep doing these stupid things here. What do I just want to get rid of this? Come on. There we go. Okay. 1 player, 2 characters. I'll go over this quick. This is not a huge thing. So this is usually not a problem. If you have 1 player running 2 characters, whether that's a main character and an NPC or just 2 characters, it's usually not a problem. And it's even less of a problem if there's fewer players. So if there's 1 player or 2 players, not a huge deal. Sometimes players just don't want the extra work anyway. And typically I end up just running NPCs or extra characters, not more than 1 in games. However, this may come up. One thing that I do have to say is this can become especially with like familiars or pets or things like that a character or player designs for a character. solely to gain tactical advantage in combat, that is when it kind of gets a little weird. If they have telepathic connection to their pet and that pet has all kinds of abilities, can fly and attack, and just basically makes the character invincible, I have a problem with that personally. So I think if that's an issue with you, or if you feel that's like kind of unbalancing your game, just impose a limitation. Allow the player to have that creature or familiar or pet, but that they can move both of them on their turn, but they can only take an action with one or a reaction with one. Okay. So that just kind of limits their use of that. So they're just not spamming attacks and basically making it kind of doubling up and making a tactical advantage that really shouldn't be there. So just thought that was worth mentioning. Another thing is rewarding awesomeness. Okay, now this is really fun for players, and it's so simple. So this isn't about like if a player rolls like really well. It's not based on a roll. It's based on what they're doing role-playing wise. So they have come up with some really witty quip or like some really creative solution to the problem. And if they have been injured, just give them a grit, or have them recover your focus die on the spot, or like kind of right in on the spot, like they find a loot item right there, throw them something to kind of encourage that play and to reward them for that awesomeness, I would say limit this though. Don't use this all the time. Kind of be sparing about it. If players start to expect that if they do something, they're going to get something from it all the time, it may kind of get weird. So just, and it might not be as exciting as well. So just to get that thing once in a while, like, bam, you did a great job here, take a grit. That's awesome. And they love it. So anyway, just thought I'd mention that too. Getting close to the end here, but I want to talk about structures. Okay, so this is a very simple concept that you can add into anything. It is basically giving grit to like physical structures. It's written as like barriers, doors, or terrain features. So like, a log that they're hiding behind, or a doorway, or like maybe even like a bridge or something, or a barrel. Anything that's in the environment that could potentially get damaged. Even like a cart, if they're running like on a cart, like maybe that cart has 10 grit and, bandits are attacking the cart. That could be a thing. So anyway, that's something you could do. Just attach grit to physical structures. I would keep it under control. I would not put too high. So I made the example here of 1, 5, and 10, like easy, average, hard. Exceeding 10 grit may get a little too hard to like break something or destroy something, especially if it's, the character's trying to break down a door. And if it has like 20 grit and it takes like 5 turns to break down a door, probably not very fun to do that. So just keep in mind, keep it low. Like make it a thing they have to achieve, but keep the numbers kind of on the lower side. Unless, of course, that doesn't fit the situation. Maybe a bridge has 30 grit. Like, I don't know what the situation you'll get into is, but just keep that in mind. It has to be achievable. And because it can be too time consuming and annoying, basically, to like spend multiple turns breaking down a door, So anyway, that is something you could do with structures. And the last thing is that I have on the list is the builders. I've already talked about the builders in other videos, But this is just stating that the builders are not a required thing. They are absolutely optional for you to use, but they are there in case you need any kind of help prepping, and they do a great job of it. So if you haven't checked out the builders, I would suggest definitely look through them, roll a few just for fun, and on your next session, like try to prep out a game just using the builders, and I think you'll be surprised. They work really well. So yeah, and so that is the optional rules section. Not a huge section, just a few things. That may be expanded somewhat when I move into Grit Galaxies. So you're going to see some different stuff with that. Some of it's relating to the setting, but these are some real basic things that I thought needed to be brought up and shown to you. So as always, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful or informational for you. I hope you are out there having some fun, playing some games, and I will see you soon. Okay, take care and keep rolling those dice.